You are listening to Killer. This is case number 12, the Pike County murders.
Lock your doors, bolt your windows, and turn off the lights. We're about to begin.
April 22nd, 2016. It was the middle of the night in Pike County, Ohio. The Rhoden family were all fast asleep in 4 separate trailer-style homes. Killed execution-style in the middle of the night, while lying in their beds, were Kenneth Rhoden, age 44, Christopher Rhoden Sr., age 40, Gary Rhoden, age 38, Dana Rhoden, age 37, Clarence Frankie Rhoden, age 20, Hannah Gilly, age 20, Hannah Rhoden, age 19, and Christopher Rhoden Jr., age 16. The only ones spared in this tragedy were unable or barely able to talk. 3 children, aged 4 days, another was 6 months, and the last one was 3 years old. The youngest, 4-day-old baby was asleep next to its mother, Hannah Rhoden.
Just as soon as it had happened, the killers were gone into the night. Not a trace of them was found. The only thing left at the sites of the murders were the small children and a lot of questions. Who would want to wipe out the Rhoden family execution style? The grisly scene of the Rhoden family was first discovered later that same morning. At 7:49 a.m. on April 22nd, just hours after the murders, Bobby Jo Manley calls in to 911 to report that she has uncovered the bodies of her brother-in-law, Christopher Rhoden, and his cousin, Gary Rhoden. We're now going to take a minute to play the 911 call for you now.
911. Yes, I need to get the 40. Let's go. Hold on. I need you to tell me the address. What's the address? Give me just a second. We walked to the mailbox. I think my brother-in-law's dead. Okay, what's the address? Give me just a second. 4077 Unionville Road. 4077. 4077. Okay, 4077 Union Hill, correct? Yes, 4077 Union Hill Road. Ma'am, you gotta tell me what's going on. There's blood all over the house. Okay. My brother-in-law's in the bedroom. It looks like someone has beat the hell out of him. Okay. There's blood all over the front room. Ma'am, can you tell me what county that's in? Is it Pike County? It's Pike County? Yes, and they drug him in the bedroom. Okay. I need you to get out of the house. Did you drive over there? Yes, I did. What's your brother-in-law's name? Huh? What's your brother-in-law's name? Ma'am? Yeah. What's his name? Chris Rhoden and Gary Rhoden. Chris and Gary Rhoden? Both of them that looks like they're dead. You think they're both dead? I think they're both dead. Looks like someone has beat the fuck out of them. Okay. Is there anybody else in the house? Not that I know of. Okay. The doors was locked when we got here, but I know where the key was at. And I went in and they're laying on the floor. I'm done out. Okay. I'm standing outside right now. Okay. Just stay out of the house. Don't let anybody go in there, okay? Yeah. All right. We got deputies on the way, okay? Thank you. You're welcome.
Just a few hours later, 1:26 p.m., Donald Stone, cousin of the Rhoden family, calls 911 to report that he found the body of his cousin, Kenneth Rhoden, dead in his camper a few miles away from the other shootings. We're going to play that 911 call for you now.
911. 911. There's Pike County, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah.
This is 911. Can I help you?
Yeah, I need a deputy to come out to close to 799 West Fork.
Okay.
It's all this stuff that's on the news. I just found my cousin with a gunshot wound.
Okay. Sir, is she alive?
No.
Okay. And you're at 799 West Fork?
It's close to 799. I don't know what his address is. He don't have a box.
You don't have a box. Okay.
I'll be standing out by the road waiting on him.
Stone?
Yeah, I'm his cousin.
What's his name?
Kenneth Rhoden.
Kenneth Rhoden?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Are you out of the house?
I'm out of the house right now. I just went in, hollering at him, and checked his right now, and I looked up at him. He had a gunshot wound.
Okay, sir. We're going to get deputies out there to you, okay? All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Before we dissect those 911 calls, I first want to talk a little bit about the Rhoden family tree. So it can get a little bit confusing because there's so many people involved in this case, and there were 8 people murdered at a few separate locations, and they were all members of the Rhoden family, and they were all killed execution style in the middle of the night. Most of them were shot in the head while laying in bed. So the Rhodens. So you have Dana Rhoden and Chris Rhoden Sr. They are ex-husband and wife. Apparently they still live together or see each other frequently because, Dana Rhoden is still there. They have 3 kids, Hannah Rhoden, Chris Rhoden Jr., and Frankie Rhoden. Now, Chris Rhoden Sr. has a brother, Kenneth Rhoden, who was reported in that last 911 call. And he also has a cousin, Gary. So Chris and Gary were the ones who were found in the first 911 call we heard. And then you also have Hannah Gilly, who was present. I hope I'm saying that last name right. I might be mispronouncing that. But you have Hannah Gilly, and her and Frankie Rhoden had a child together. That was the 6-month-old. Frankie also was the father of the 3-year-old. And then Hannah Rhoden had a child with somebody else, and that child was the 4-day-old child that was with her when she was murdered. So I know that's a little bit confusing. I will post this on our website as well as in our chapters as part of the episode. So if you have a podcast player that supports chapters, I'll post this little map of the family tree if you want to take a look at it while you're listening. I know it gets a little hairy. In terms of the story, I don't know that it totally matters that you know everybody and how they're connected, but it's just nice to get that out there if you're so inclined to care. So what did you think of those 911 calls?
The first one was definitely, there's a lot of emotion there. Obviously Bobby Joe walks in and finds Christopher and Gary both, what she says looks like somebody beat the hell out of them. They obviously were shot to death, but that happened just before 8 o'clock in the morning. What I thought was crazy was, maybe they were focused on that residence when they called 911 and the police were there. And, Donald Stone goes out to check on his cousin and finds Kenneth Rhoden dead in his camper. And this is 5.5 hours later. And that's only 3 of the 8 so far. So things are unfolding kind of slowly that morning with everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact timeline in between all the family being discovered, but I think what happens is you get that first 911 call, and then they start looking at the other properties that are nearby and start discovering everybody. I think it happens. The first several people, I think probably the first 7 people are found relatively quickly within, that first 911 call. And then you have Kenneth found a few hours later by his cousin. Yeah, it was weird. They also reported, and I don't recall if she said it in the 911 call, so excuse me if I'm repeating the information, but I think the doors were locked. So after they killed these people, they locked the door and then they left. So I think she actually had to unlock the door to even get in, and she finds them dead when she goes inside.
No, that you didn't bring that up earlier. That's even stranger. I mean, obviously trying to cover their tracks. They want to lead them to believe that the doors were closed, and I don't know if they're trying to stage things to look like a murder-suicide or whatever, but by locking the doors, they give that false sense of, well, the doors were locked, they were in bed, how did this happen?
Yeah, and it's strange too the way like the one person's reportedly beaten up, and like I don't recall from researching finding anything else about anybody being beat up. So they were all just shot. So whoever was beaten was pissing somebody off, apparently. And you have to wonder, like, were they really beaten, or was it just there was so much blood at the crime scene that she just said that, was it really the case?
But she did say in the call that there was blood everywhere, so it could be a case of there was just, as graphic as it sounds, when they were shot, that one or both of them could have, been bleeding so heavily that it just sprayed everywhere. They said they were killed execution style in the bed, so yeah, just the emotion and how dramatic that scene unfolded when she walked into that first house trailer and found them, emotions were high, so everything you see is going to be the intensity is going to be multiplied by 1,000, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just it's weird when you walk in and you discover this, what's going through your mind. Like, would you even feel safe being on that property at that point? Like, I don't even know if I'd stay there and call 911. I think I would get the hell out of Dodge. I'd be afraid somebody was still out there doing stuff. It's kind of crazy. I do have an article I found that kind of detailed a little bit about each of the victims, and I wanted to read this. I think it's kind of good to kind of get to know a little bit about these people, because it's kind of an abrupt case and it's very strange. Like, there's not a whole lot about the family that's out there. It's more or less like just the way they were killed is what gets talked about a lot. So Chris Rhoden Sr., he was 40. He was a father, grandfather, and laborer, a quiet man who stitched together a patchwork of jobs. He helped build Big Bear Family Resort in Lucasville, and he continued to build decks and playgrounds at the campground. He hauled gravel and bought and rebuilt salvage cars, which is important because later we'll talk a little bit about that. He was found shot multiple times, lying on the floor of a bedroom in his trailer near Gary Rhoden's body, and it appeared that he struggled with his attackers. And then you have Chris Rhoden Jr. He was 16. He was the son of Christopher and Dana Rhoden. He was a freshman at Pike County High School. He recently got his driver's license. He was small in stature. He was loud in voice and was described as a typical rebellious teenager with a penchant for parties. He was found shot multiple times in the trailer that he shared with his mom. Frankie Rhoden, he was 20. He was the oldest son of Dana and Christopher Rhoden. He was a father to Brentley Rhoden, age 3, and Ruger Rhoden, who was 6 months at the time. He was engaged to Hannah Gilley. He worked at McCoy Lumber, and he was an avid hunter. He was shot multiple times. His body was found with Gilley. Their infant son was found alive between them. And then you have Dana Manley Rhoden. She was 37. She was the mother, grandmother, and she was also a nurse's aide. She often worked double shifts at Hillside Skilled Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Peebles. She was known to bring fast food hamburgers in for her patients. She was committed to her family. She was found shot multiple times in the head. Her body was found in the trailers that she shared with her children, Christopher and Hannah, and her 5-day-old granddaughter. Gary Rhoden, he was 38. He lived with his cousin Christopher Rhoden, who helped him overcome drug and alcohol issues. He was known as kind and generous. He was found shot multiple times. His body was found near Christopher Rhoden's body. Both were on the floor in Christopher Rhoden's trailer. He's buried in South Shore, Kentucky. Hannah Rhoden, 19. She was mother to Sophia Wagner, 2.5, and Kylie Rhoden, now 6 months, daughter of Christopher and Dana. She would have graduated from Pike County High School in May of 2016. She worked as a nurse's aide at Edgewood Manor in Lucasville. She was found shot multiple times in the bed that she shared with her then 5-day-old daughter, who was physically unharmed. Hannah Gilley was the mother to Ruger Rhoden, now 11 months, a Northwest High School graduate. She did not have a job outside of the home. Her life revolved around her fiancé, Frankie Rhoden, and Ruger. She was shot multiple times and found in bed with Frankie. It appeared that she had earlier nursed the infant, who was found awake and physically unharmed. And then there was Kenneth Rhoden. He was 44, father to 4 children and grandfather to 4. Divorced from Stacy Rigsby in 2006. He was a hard worker who awoke daily by 4 a.m. to drive to his job at U.S. Utilities in Columbus. He lived by himself with his pit terrier mix Brownie in a camper on Left Folk Road. He was shot once in the head and found in bed. So that's kind of the summary there of the Rhoden family.
The initial days of the investigation began, and a lot of rumors and speculations began to run rampant. The first press conference featuring Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine, just hours after the grisly discovery, suggested there may be a link to drug-related activity. DeWine stated that they found evidence of a marijuana growing operation on several of the properties being investigated. Authorities had conducted 50 to 60 interviews and executed 5 search warrants within an hour of the discovery. DeWine went on to say that the massacre was a sophisticated operation in which the killer or killers did everything they could to make it difficult to solve the case.
DeWine stated that investigators believed the family was targeted and that the general public was safe and shouldn't feel threatened. In the immediate aftermath, the remaining Rhoden family gathered at a local church to pay respects to their slain family members. Their first issued statement, which was read by Kimberly Newman, a member of the Ohio Crisis Response Team, was as follows. The Rhoden family would like to thank everyone for all of the outpouring of prayers and support for their family. They ask that you continue to keep them in your prayers. They'd like to thank all law enforcement from Pike County and all surrounding counties for their immediate response, especially to Sheriff Charlie Reeder for all his hard work. They ask that everyone be respectful for their loss at this time. They also have a plea to anyone who has any information on this matter to call 1-855-BCI-OHIO.
The next several days see the Rhoden family being laid to rest and respects being paid by their families and the community. On May 12th to May 13th, authorities move a camper, hundreds of vehicles, and 4 mobile homes from the Rhoden family property to a warehouse leased by the Sheriff's Department in order to preserve the crime scene. Fox 19 out of Cincinnati, Ohio, would investigate the storage of these crime scenes over a 6-week period and over 70 hours. They wanted to see how well the sheriff's office was protecting the crime scenes they took the time to move to a warehouse for preservation purposes. The investigation revealed that there was not round-the-clock surveillance, nor were there any security measures stopping people from entering the warehouse. There was also a chemical company that shared the compound with the evidence in the storage. Employees of the chemical company were witnessed near the entryway to the stored evidence, coming within feet of the doorway. Legal expert Mike Allen said that he was shocked by the lack of security, and it could prove the evidence to be virtually useless.
There's a lot to unpack there. Let's start kind of at the top. So Mike DeWine, the Ohio Attorney General, states right off the rip that there were marijuana growing operations that appeared to be on most of the properties that they investigate. And so the first theories that come out about this case are drug-related. You'll have, there was a lot of back and forth in the media, and I even remember hearing this, being that we live in Ohio, that there was a lot of speculation that these families were involved in, drugs and selling of drugs and all of that stuff. And so one immediately says, man, based on that and the way that people were murdered, this sounds like some kind of cartel killing. Like, this family just really pissed off the wrong gang, and they came in and just executed them. So that was like really the initial theory that was coming down, like within hours of the investigation kicking off.
Yeah, well, once they started finding the growing operations, that's makes sense to me. It depends on the quantity and how large of scale of operation that it was. To me, to come up with that theory, like right off the cuff like that, it sounds like it could have been a pretty significant size of an operation. Like they were growing lots of marijuana or whatever. I don't know that I didn't see any details on if they found processing stuff, whatever. But it had to be fairly significant for them to come up with that conclusion right away, or that theory, I should say.
Yeah, I never found like a whole lot of detail around the marijuana that they found, but what I did find, it seems like that area of the state where they live, and that just general area, is pretty ripe with people growing marijuana. So it's not something that is unique to them. Let's just say that. So people who live in that area, it's fairly common that they find these things there. So I think that's kind of what helps investigators kind of sift through, like, whether or not this is truly drug related or not, is that this is fairly common. And obviously you said in there, within a few hours, they had already, interviewed, like, what was it, 50 to 60 people or something like that, like right away. They weren't messing around. And so, and that's what I like about this case. I feel like the police did a fantastic job at least up front. I mean, we have that last little bit there we'll talk about, but up front, they're all over this. They're not messing around. 8 people were murdered, and they're, quickly interviewing people that they know that know the family and trying to like figure out what's going on right away. There's no screwing around here. They're getting right on it.
Yeah, and rightfully so, and thank goodness, because I'm sure they were wanting to squash anything right away and make sure that, there wasn't another target outside of that area. So I think they drew that conclusion that it was a very targeted execution, because these are all very close family members on a very, confined property to a few different households within a small area. So, but they definitely, thankfully, for once, one of these cases, we see a sense of urgency from law enforcement to jump on this and start squashing things right away, because it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we see a lot of cases where law enforcement just either drops the ball or isn't equipped to deal with something like, a big murder case. So let's talk about the evidence that they move. So law enforcement actually physically moves. They rent out some facilities and they move all of the trailers to these facilities, as well as like hundreds of cars that they bring with them. And that goes back to Chris Rhoden and his scrap metal work. Okay. So like there's hundreds of cars they take though. I mean, there's tons of cars. I couldn't believe how many they had, and they take them all and put them in storage. But it was pretty expensive for the sheriff's office to do this. And so they do it for a period of time. They had, they said they had round the clock surveillance and stuff. And then one of the local newspapers in Cincinnati, I think it was the Cincinnati Enquirer, or no, I'm sorry, it was Fox 19 out of Cincinnati. They go and they start investigating, like, okay, so you guys spent all this money and time moving all of this stuff to this, storage location. How secure is this location? How well are you guys maintaining these crime scenes? Because the whole reason you moved everything was to make sure nobody could come and mess with it. And so they start looking into it, and they're finding that, the gates to the entryway are unlocked and able to get into easily, that they share the compound with a chemical company who can, the employees could have walked in at any time, when the news wasn't paying attention. They could have been inside there screwing around. Like, anybody had access to this place, and there was never any sheriff's officers sitting out there guarding the property. That's what they found, right? And I believe it comes out a little bit later that sheriffs kind of admit to it a little bit, and they're like, yeah, we're watching it, but we're not doing it 24/7 anymore. It got too expensive. And so, that's a little strange.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think that if I disagree with anything that law enforcement did to this point, it would be moving all of that stuff. I think it would have been a lot less expensive to set up some kind of surveillance at the family property versus, picking up and moving all of that stuff. And there has to be some compromise there too to the evidence with moving that amount of stuff, to a secure location. I mean, I'm sure there was some, they were meticulous with what they were moving and, trying not to damage any of the evidence, but still, I think leaving it where it was, and it could have been a lot easier to set up some kind of surveillance at the farm, whether it's, perimeter cameras, whatever, and try to quarantine that area and preserve it as much as possible, I think would have been the better route.
Yeah, well, I have mixed feelings on that, because, if you moved that stuff, then you do have it preserved. And it depends on what kind of evidence they were able to gather. That kind of makes this whole thing, makes or breaks it. And so they either know or don't know what they have in those trailers, right? And those cars and stuff. So if they know that they have evidence that's very sensitive and they moved it for that reason, but then left it unsecure, it's kind of like, well, why'd you waste everyone's money and time? But if you just are leaving it there because you just need it in case you might want to go back to it or something like that, like, that you want it there so that you can go review things as you start piecing things together, that's not so bad. But if you left it there, clearly the people who came out there were able to sneak up and kill 8 people without anybody detecting them. Who's to say they weren't able to come back and burn it all down? Even if they were on some kind of surveillance, you still might not know who they are. Like, if I somehow snuck around, wore all black, had a vehicle like miles away where they weren't surveilling, was able to get to the property, burn it down and disappear, like, then you just lost everything, and you still don't know who did it. Like, yeah, you might have caught them on surveillance, but they're all blacked out. You're not going to know who they are. So, I'm kind of with them for moving it, even when it was not totally secured.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, though, I guess. Yeah, if it was a great point in saying that 8 people were murdered and somebody slipped in and out basically undetected and did that, It's far less of a crime to sneak back in there and burn it all down, even if you're on camera. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would be worried about, and I think they were too. Like, if they were able to sneak up on 8 people and murder them, they're able to get back on this property and burn it all down and hide the evidence as much as possible and probably go undetected. And I'm guessing, I don't know for a fact, but the area that they're in is probably mostly, like, I don't know, probably fairly desolate. It's probably not packed in with houses and homes where they were, so it probably would have been fairly easy. That's probably what the sheriff determined was it's pretty easy for them to sneak back up here, even if we have cameras out here, to come out here and just, like, destroy evidence and us not be able to know who it was and get away without us catching them. So, I kind of agree with them in this regard that they moved it. And the other thing is too, like, I know there's a big deal about it being not secured. And, this news report comes from the perspective of, like, kind of like snooping around. Like, did they actually try to go in and, like, go in there? Because maybe it was a little more secure than they know, and police just weren't letting them know that. Like, it probably was under surveillance, and that surveillance is probably a lot better because it's a confined area. And so if one of those employees from the chemical company wander in there, they're not going to be dressed in all black and have a ski mask on and go in and start screwing with things. Like, if you knew that stuff was next to you, or if you knew you worked near a storage facility, like 99.999% of people are not going to go in there and disturb anything. Like, knowing what's in there or not, like, you probably just aren't wandering into the storage facility.
Exactly. Why run the risk of leaving some of your evidence behind that could implicate you? I mean, that to me, that'd be the scariest part. Oh, I'm going to go in here and snoop around, but, oh, shit, left some fingerprints or left some DNA of some sort behind, and they swabbed it and found it in this massive search. No, I'm screwed.
Right. And not only that, but, like, if you went over there and started screwing around with stuff, just knowing that if you know what's over there, like, just pretend that the people who work at this chemical plant know that is the Rhoden family trailer situation or whatever, or some sensitive police info is over there, like some sensitive evidence. Just knowing that it's the cops that own it right now, like it's under their protection. Are you going over there and screwing with it? Because that's kind of like going to the police station and screwing with stuff at the police station. Like, that's not the place you're going to go screw with stuff, because you're going to get in big trouble real fast. Like, it's not going to take much for them to figure it out. And that's just asking for it. So I don't know about you, but if I knew or had an inkling that it was the sheriff's office that owned whatever was in there, no matter how curious I was, I am not going over there because I'm not getting arrested for it.
I would feel the same exact way. And I'm sure the news reporters, in the back of their mind, they did the same thing. I don't think they would have been stupid enough to try to get in there because they knew what the implication would be, right, if they get caught. Even if they're a quote-unquote investigative reporter. I mean, you see these guys on the news all the time, and they always come across as real assholes, real in your face, and trying to get somebody to make a comment on film and, whatever. They wear this stupid trench coats from fucking Sherlock Holmes days 30 years ago, and they think it's cool. But I don't go down a tangent. This guy's driving me crazy. But they know better. Just like you said, they know that they don't want to step within 10 feet of that place, because if it's under surveillance, it's protected and property of the sheriff's department at that point. Of all the people that would know better than to snoop around there, I would hope it would be these reporters.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, I don't think they actually try to actually go in there and look at stuff, because if they did, they'll maybe quickly find out that there's an alarm system set up and the police will be there instantly, or there's surveillance and they'll get, who knows? I mean, they did things like drive through the parking lot and go up to the gate and check those things. Yeah, on the surface, maybe it isn't secure, but you probably don't know who knows? Maybe there's nothing. There might not be anything, but just knowing that it's the cops that own it, you're probably not screwing with it. So that being said, let's move on. In May 2017, a little over a year later, authorities began searching a 71-acre farm in Peebles, Adams County, that was sold a few months earlier and was owned by Edward Jake Wagner, Hannah Rhoden's former boyfriend, with whom she had a child, 3-year-old Sophia. A second Wagner property was also searched the same day. In June 2017, Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine and Pike County Sheriff Charlie Reeder, asked the public for information regarding the Wagner family. The Wagner family had recently moved out of Ohio to Kenai, Alaska. The Cincinnati Enquirer received a quote from the family with regard to the purpose of their move, in which they stated, "Really, the point of moving up there was basically just to get into a better environment so they wouldn't talk about us. Sophia's getting older, and so she wouldn't hear it. And then it followed us here." That quote was given by Jake Wagner, the father of Sophia. The investigators did not name anyone from the Wagner family as a person of interest or a suspect at this time.
In August of 2018, investigators searched 2 more properties in connection with the massacre: the Flying W Farms in Pike County and a house on South Webster Avenue in Scioto County. Authorities were mum on what they were searching for, but both properties had ties to the Wagner family. In September of 2018, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that the autopsy reports of the victims can be released to the public. This was against the wishes of the Pike County coroner and prosecutor. After the autopsies were initially completed, the media asked to see the reports but were denied, which led to the media suing for the records to be unsealed. The autopsy revealed that Christopher Rhoden Sr. was shot 9 times, and most of the victims were shot in the head multiple times.
The Wagner family responded to reports denying their involvement in the shootings. Angela Wagner responded to the Cincinnati Enquirer via email denying their involvement, stating that what happened was devastating and that Hannah Rhoden was like a daughter to her. John Clark, the Wagner's attorney, also issued statements denying the Wagner's involvement, stating, "A year ago, 4 of the Wagner family members had provided laptops, phones, and DNA samples to investigators and agreed to be interviewed about the slayings. The family was being harassed, while the real killer or killers are out there." Let's talk a little bit about the Wagner family tree, because I know I just dropped some names about the Wagners, and you're probably thinking, who in the heck are these people? So the Wagner family that becomes under some investigation has a tie to the Rhodens. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about the Rhoden family tree, I mentioned Hannah Rhoden had a daughter, and she was the 4-day-old daughter. So she also was in a relationship with Jake Wagner. So that was the person who gave the quote there about moving to Alaska. And so they had a daughter together. That's Sophia. And so that kind of ties that family. That's how they tie together. So at the top of the Wagner family tree, you have George Billy Wagner III and Angela Wagner, his wife. And then they have 2 kids, George Wagner IV and Edward Jake Wagner. So that's the Wagner family, those 4. They make up the main component of this case here. And so they are the ones who they're kind of being investigated by police, and police are sniffing around, and their names are getting thrown around a little bit, and then they start getting a little weird, if you will. And so they start selling off property that they own, and the police start searching it as soon as they sell it. And then they move to Alaska, which is just bizarre. So hey, we're not guilty, but we're going to move as far away from Ohio as physically possible while still being a United States citizen. It was just like, if that's not suspicious, I don't know what is.
Yeah, no kidding. That's the first red flag for sure. For me, it would be anyways. Why in the hell would they just pick up, turn tail, and move all the way to Alaska? Just because they don't want the young child to, start hearing about rumors about this and that, and, kind of tarnishing what she thinks of the family. It sounds a little bit insane to me.
Yeah, it is. And also not mentioned in that family tree, there's 2 grandmothers, one on each side, Rita Newcomb and Frederica Wagner. And they're the mothers of, Angela and Billy. And they also are kind of, stirred up in this. And I believe one of them runs that Flying W farm or whatever. And so police start looking into them, and they're questioning, what's going on here with this family. Something strange is going on. And then, so they start kind of barking up that tree, and like we said earlier, they just moved to Alaska, out of the blue. It's like, what the heck is going on?
And to relate to this story a little bit, on a slightly a couple different levels, I may or may not have some family in Southern Ohio that has, let's say, similar living arrangements. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but for them to be a close-knit family on a small farm, and there's a couple other small farms connected, and just one subgroup of that, they're all really close individuals. It's close family. And for one small group of them to just pick up and move, like you said, to the furthest possible place and still be a U.S. citizen, that had to be red flag to authorities. People just, if they've been vested in an area and, even if they don't have a lot to show, for their family, in this case, a bunch of house trailers, they're growing dope, whatever. But still, and generally speaking, these families are usually pretty tight knit. So for them to just uproot and, hit the road is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Packing up and just heading to Alaska is not a thing most normal families do. So, you better have a good reason why you're just like uprooting your entire family and heading out to Alaska. Like, it's just, that's strange.
On November 13th, 2018, the Wagner family were arrested by authorities. Arrested and charged with murder are Angela Wagner, age 48, her husband, George Billy Wagner, age 47, and their two sons, George Wagner IV, age 27, and Edward Jake Wagner, age 26, father of Sophia. There was an obsession with control of the children, stated Attorney General Mike DeWine. Two others were also arrested and were believed to be involved in the murder or the cover-up of the murders, Rita Newcomb and Frederica Wagner, mothers of Angela and Billy Wagner. Frederica is accused of forging custody documents. They did this quickly, calmly, and very carefully, but not carefully enough, said Pike County Sheriff Charles Reeder.
Prosecutors alleged that Angela Wagner purchased several items in the months leading up to the deaths of the Rhoden family, and those include specific shoes from Walmart, brass catchers, items with which to build brass catchers, ammunition, a magazine clip, a bug detector, and or items that were used to build silencers, and or various other items in preparation for these crimes and indictments. Brass catchers are used to collect discharged bullet casings, for those who are not familiar. The Rhoden family murders is the largest homicide investigation in Ohio history. Mike DeWine stated that authorities conducted tens of thousands of hours of investigative work, followed more than 1,100 tips from the public, and conducted 550 interviews. The drug theory that was initially part of the investigation due to the discovery of the marijuana growing on the property was dismissed. The Wagner family was also charged with conspiracy, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, tampering with evidence, unlawful possession of a dangerous ordinance, forgery, unauthorized use of property, interception of wire, oral, or electronic communications, obstructing justice, and aggravated burglary. So this family just kind of comes out of the woodwork, if you will, a little bit, and then just suddenly becomes like their primary focus. So the case got kind of quiet there for a while, and there were a lot of articles that you would come across while researching the case where it was in between the time that the murders happened and they catch the Wagner family. Prior to that, you'd get a lot of those articles and they'd state like, nothing's going on in this case and where are we now and blah, 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 blah. But meanwhile, you start reading about it. Wagner family must have been of interest to the police for quite some time. And so they were just doing their due diligence trying to connect the dots. And so I think that kind of goes back to why that storage facility wasn't under such tight security, is because I think they kind of figured out who it was, but they just needed to piece it back together, and that maybe the evidence wasn't necessarily within the trailer, it was more or less elsewhere, and the evidence that they needed they already had. So I'm sure there's some stuff that they got out of that trailer that they'll use when they go to trial for this, but this is very recent. I mean, this was just a couple of weeks ago, November 13th. So that's awesome that they caught these people, because that was a case that people were just like perplexed by. And like I said earlier, they had a lot of this gang theory and drug theory and all this stuff. And then it comes to find out that they really think it's more or less over the custody battle that was going on between Hannah Rhoden and Jake Wagner.
Yeah, it completely sounds like that was the case with the forged custody documents and things like that. It sounds like the family was, the obsession of making sure that they had custody of that child was, strictly the motive. And like you said, it took a little bit of time to put the pieces together, but they have the evidence. They have this Wagner family that just picks up and moves away. I think we stated earlier that some of the evidence that was gathered, from their warrants was, laptops and whatever. So like you said, I think they knew who they were dealing with, a lot sooner than they had came out, and, they wanted to make sure all the pieces were put together before the arrests were made. You have computers with items to make brass catchers and ammo and clips, bug detectors, how to build a silencer. No pun intended, but the smoking gun is right there. They picked up, they moved away, and all the stuff in their search history is right there. So,
right, yeah. And so I know you put together some audio about the arrest. So let's play that now, and we'll take a listen, and then we'll dissect that before we wrap up.
Well, good afternoon. We promised that the day would come when arrests would be made in the Pike County massacres. Today is that day. Yesterday, a Pike County grand jury indicted 4 individuals for aggravated murder with death penalty specifications. George Billy Wagner III, his wife Angela Wagner, and their sons George Wagner IV and Edward Jake Wagner. After an extensive, thorough joint investigation by the Attorney General's Office, the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, as well as our Special Prosecution Section, and Pike County Sheriff Charles Reeder's office, these 4 individuals are now in custody for allegedly committing this heartless, ruthless, cold-blooded murder. These are the faces of the victims, an entire family and members of their extended family, massacred. Many of them were killed as they slept. They are Christopher Rhoden Sr., age 40. His ex-wife, Dana Manley Rhoden, age 37. Their children, Hannah Mae Rhoden, age 19. Christopher Rhoden Jr., age 16. Clarence Frankie Rhoden, age 20. And his fiancée, Hannah Hazel Gilly, age 20. Further, Christopher Rhoden's brother, Kenneth Rhoden, age 44. Their cousin, Gary Rhoden, age 38. All 8 victims were killed in cold blood. They were shot in their own homes. They were brutally and viciously executed. The killers knew the territory and meticulously planned these horrendous murders. The 8 victims left behind an extended grief-stricken family, including 4 young children. Thankfully, in their only show of mercy, the killers spared the 3 children at the scenes. Children then ages 3 years of age, 6 months, and 5 days. At the center of this case were members of one family whom we believe the evidence will show conspired together to kill these 8 people, 8 of their friends. 4 members of the Wagner family, a husband, a wife, their 2 adult sons, are all now facing numerous charges, including 8 counts of aggravated murder each, 1 count for each victim. The aggravated murder charges also include death penalty specifications for all 4 suspects. Now, because this is an open prosecution, we won't be able to say much about motive, but you'll see from the indictments that custody of that young child plays a role in this case. We believe that the Wagners conspired together to develop an elaborate plan to kill the 8 victims under the cover of darkness and then carefully cover up their tracks. We believe the evidence will show that the suspects spent months planning the crimes. They studied the victims' habits and their routines. They knew the layouts of their homes. They knew where they slept. And then after executing each victim, we believe the evidence will further show that the suspects tampered with the evidence, such as the victims' phones and the surveillance cameras on their properties. Now, as in all killings, even those that are methodically planned, mistakes are made. And it's our job to find those mistakes. We've been gathering evidence in this case for about 2.5 years. In July of this year, at the request of prosecutors with my office's Special Prosecution Section, along with the Pike County prosecuting attorney Rob Junk, a judge impaneled an investigative grand jury to meet regularly to examine all the evidence we had collected over the course of the investigation, and further to gather additional evidence. This investigation began the day of the murders, and with investigators discovering the last piece of significant physical evidence on October 30th of this year. The examination of that evidence was completed a few days later on November 7th. This particular evidence, along with all the other pieces of this giant puzzle, all the other key evidence in this investigation, have led us to today's charges and arrests. In addition to aggravated murder, these 4 family members are also charged with a number of other offenses. They include conspiracy, engaging in a pattern of corrupt activity, aggravated burglary for allegedly breaking into the Rhoden's home to commit the crimes, tampering with evidence, unlawful possession of a dangerous ordinance, unauthorized use of property, interception of wire, oral, or electronic communications, and finally, obstruction of justice. The 4 suspects are also all facing charges of forgery for allegedly forging child custody documents. Two other people were also arrested today in conjunction with the cover-up of these crimes. And let me again emphasize, these 2 individuals were arrested in regard to the cover-up of these crimes. Angela's mother, Rita Newcomb, and Billy's mother, Frederica Wagner. The charges against these 2 suspects relate to their alleged actions to mislead our authorities.
So there you have it from Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine as he read out the, charges against the Wagner family, which we already stated, but it's always good to hear it from the source. So, what are your thoughts on that, Craig?
This is all happening very recently. I think, moving forward, I'm hoping we can do a part 2 to this case specifically when we get to the trial portion and, when penalties are handed down. They didn't mess around with this Wagner family. There's death penalty specifications with all charges, or with the murder charges specifically, but for all members of the Wagner family. So I think once they get through trial and they get to that point, I don't see an issue with them, getting the death penalty, obviously, unless they plead, guilty to some of those charges. There's a lot of charges there, but, in most cases they'll try to plead down so they don't get the needle, but we'll wait and see.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this case unfolds once it goes to trial. Hopefully justice is served and, they have the right individuals. I have no doubt in my mind that they found the right group of people involved. That tie-in seems to make some sense. I'm not surprised, by that finding that it was somebody connected to the family. I am surprised though that they decided to take out like 8 people. I mean, that's just incredibly cool.
They wiped out a huge portion of that family, and I'm a little bit surprised that the lengths that they went to execute all of these family members. I'm a little bit surprised that they spared the children that were at these scenes too. Why? When they're in that killing rage, obviously there's some sympathy there for the children, and that's why they didn't execute the children as well. And thank goodness they didn't. But what kept them from, taking that final step and just killing everybody?
Yeah, that was the strange part. They had like some sort of moral compass. You're going to take out all these people and murder them, but not the kids.
Yeah, ruin their lives forever by killing their parents and everybody around them, and leave them there to, to live that legacy down the road. They're too young to realize what's happening now today, but someday they're going to have to face that reality.
Yeah, I want to see too, like where this ends up in terms of like how did this go down? I want to hear the story. Like, how did they actually go into each of these homes? Like, were all four of them out there shooting people simultaneously? Did they like all four, like the Wagner family, just every one of them was out there in a trailer at a different time? Or did they go like one trailer at a time with just like two of the people went and did it and the rest were there for planning or like driving or something? Like what's the strategy here? Like, that's kind of what I want to see. I want to see like how did they go about this plan? Like, what does the prosecution come up with? Like, what's their story?
Yeah, that will be a very interesting piece of the trial, and I'm hoping that information comes out as well, because I'm very interested in seeing how they went through with this plan. To me, it sounds like there was a very vicious assault at the one property and then the murders, but for the most part, it sounds like everybody else was executed while they slept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I don't know, we'll see how this unfolds, and then when we have any updates, I'm sure we'll bring them to you guys. And so I think with that, we're going to wrap up for this week. And so, again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for reaching out to us on social media. We really enjoy it. So if you wouldn't mind, do us a favor. If you like our show, go out and rate us wherever you listen to your podcasts. That would be very helpful. It helps us appear higher in search rankings when people are looking for shows such as this. If you'd like to support us financially, please head out to our website, www.killerpod.net, and click on the support button at the top of the page or via the navigation menu. Or you can also check out our Patreon page, which is www.patreon.com/killerpodcast.
And also, don't forget to follow us on all the normal social media sites. We can be found at Twitter at @killer_podcast, on Instagram at @killerpodcast, on our Facebook page, facebook.com/killerpodcast, or if you simply just want to shoot us an email, we can be reached at killerpodcast@gmail.com.
That being said, Craig's going to go murder an IQ test, and I'm going to eat some breakfast.
I'm planning on murdering some bacon.
Stay safe, everyone.